I still remember the afternoon light pouring across my bedroom floor, golden and soft, the kind of light that usually made me feel safe. But on that day, it caught on something that stopped me cold. My younger sister Clara stood in front of my mirror, twirling slowly, her hands smoothing down ivory satin that shimmered like water. It was my after-party wedding dress, the one I had hunted for over months, the one Ethan's eyes had lit up for when he saw the sketch. And dangling from her ears, my grandmother's sapphire earrings heirlooms promised to me. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. My heart thudded so loudly that I thought the walls might hear. I whispered her name, Clara, but my voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. Instead of guilt, her face brightened, as though she'd been waiting for me to catch her. "It looks better on me anyway," she said lightly. "Mom agrees." Behind her, the door creaked, and there they were, my parents, hovering in the hallway, faces arranged in that blend of discomfort and quiet determination. They knew. Of course, they had known all along. My mother stepped forward, voice dipped in that syrupy tone she used when asking me to bend. "Sweetheart, you'll still have the main gown. Can't you share just this once?" My father nodded like it was obvious, waving his hand. "Your sister has always looked radiant in white." Their words pressed against me like heavy stones dragging memories out of closets I'd locked years ago. Clara borrowing my designer shoes, returning them scuffed beyond repair. My vintage purse smeared with makeup stains. The cashmere sweater I saved 3 paychecks for, stretched beyond recognition. Every time the same phrase, family, comes first. I felt the weight of those years pressing down the endless cycle of stepping aside, of being the responsible one, the accommodating one. But as I stood there watching Clara's fingers glide across fabric that was mine, something inside me shifted. It was like tectonic plates grinding after decades of quiet pressure. For the first time, my shoulders rolled back, my spine straightened, and my voice carried without shaking. "Take it off." The room fell silent. Clara blinked at me, lips parting in disbelief. She laughed, brittle and thin. "You can't be serious." But I was. More serious than I'd ever been. My mother reached for me, pleading now. "Madeline, darling, there's no need for drama. Your sister just wants to feel special." My voice dropped lower, firmer, anchored in something new. "Now, or I call off the wedding." My father's face flushed red, but even he hesitated. Clara spat the word "fine," yanking roughly at the zipper. I caught her wrist before she tore the fabric. The earrings, too. With exaggerated care, she pulled them free and dropped them into my palm-cold sapphires burning against my skin. She stormed out, theatrics filling the air she left behind. My parents lingered, their glares cold and promising consequences. When the door finally shut, I hung the dress back in my closet with trembling hands. I traced the fabric's smooth surface, my pulse still racing. 29 years of silence pressed behind me like shadows. For decades, I had kept peace by giving away pieces of myself. But staring at the ivory folds, I made a silent promise: not anymore. This wedding would not be stolen, not bent to someone else's need for attention. For the first time, I felt something more powerful than fear. I felt resolve. And I knew this moment was only the beginning of the story I had to tell. Growing up with Clara was like living in 2 different households under one roof. To outsiders, we were the Carter sisters, close in age, always together in family photos. But inside, the roles were clear. Clara was the golden child showered with attention and endless praise. I was the reliable one the girl trusted to clean up messes, finish projects, and stay quiet when my feelings got bruised. Every birthday party, every holiday, Clara somehow found her way to the center. My achievements often became footnotes, politely acknowledged, but rarely celebrated with the same sparkle in my parents' eyes. I remember the night of my high school prom. I had spent weeks saving for a gown, carefully altering it myself. The moment I stepped out of my room, ready to leave, Clara came down the stairs in a designer dress my mother had bought last minute. Everyone gasped at how stunning she looked. No one noticed that I had done my own makeup or that I had earned a scholarship earlier that day. That small moment taught me something in my family recognition wasn't evenly shared. Clara was the star, and I was expected to applaud from the wings. As I grew older, I learned that this pattern wasn't unique to us. In America, psychologists call it parental favoritism, and studies show it can leave deep marks. Children who feel overlooked often struggle with self-esteem, constantly seeking approval in school careers and relationships. I recognized myself in those studies, the girl who tried to earn love through achievements, who thought being perfect might finally tip the balance. But perfection was never enough, because the favoritism was baked into the family dynamic. Clara didn't ask for it, but she never turned it down either. The truth is, many families repeat these patterns without realizing it. Parents may justify their choices as keeping peace or helping the weaker sibling, but in reality, they are shaping invisible hierarchies that last well into adulthood. I had believed for years that if I kept giving my clothes my time, my silence, I could eventually prove my worth. But all I really did was train everyone to take more. And Clara, sensing the safety net beneath her, never learned to stand on her own without stepping on me. The cycle fed itself silently year after year. That night, with the dress, something broke, but something also opened. I finally began to see the family script for what it was not destiny, but a pattern. Patterns can be broken. For the first time, I understood that change wouldn't come from Clara suddenly respecting boundaries, or my parents suddenly opening their eyes. It would have to come from me. The lesson was simple, but hard-earned. If you don't protect your own place in the story, someone else will write it for you. And in my case, they had already started drafting the next chapter. Because only a few weeks later, my parents revealed a plan that would shake me again, something they called a co-bride ceremony, where Clara and I would share my wedding day. It sounded absurd, even laughable at first, but in their eyes, it was perfectly reasonable. And that's when I realized the stakes were about to rise higher than I ever imagined. When my parents first suggested that Clara should be a co-bride, I thought it was a poor joke. But their faces were serious, almost relieved, as if they had finally solved a complicated problem. It's a new trend, my mother insisted, flipping through a wedding magazine. Sisters sharing the spotlight. It's very European. My father nodded, adding that it would make the family look united. I sat there in disbelief, wondering how anyone could twist my wedding into a stage play starring Clara. It wasn't a compromise, it was a theft, dressed in polite language, and they expected me to smile. The absurdity only grew when I discovered emails between my mother and the wedding planner. There were notes about 2 bridal suites, 2 coordinated entrances, and even a joint cake cutting. Clara had already posted a photo on Instagram, wearing a white dress that resembled mine, captioned, "Final fitting for our sister ceremony." Comments poured in from friends and relatives, congratulating her, congratulating us, as though this was something I had planned. My phone buzzed endlessly with questions I didn't know how to answer. How do you explain to the world that your wedding is being rewritten without your consent? In America, we like to think weddings are sacred, your day, your choice. But the truth is, family pressure often plays a bigger role than we admit. I've heard stories from colleagues about in-laws who dictated the guest list, or cousins who demanded special roles. But having your own sister announced as a second bride, that felt like something out of a satirical movie. Yet for my parents, it was framed as kindness. "Clara needs this," my mother repeated, as if my sister's heartbreak entitled her to half of my marriage celebration. The logic wasn't just flawed, it was destructive. The emotional weight was crushing. On one side, I had relatives calling to say I should be the bigger person, and on the other, I had friends asking if I'd lost control of my own wedding. Each conversation made me feel like I was drowning. And this is a trap many people fall into, thinking that keeping peace means sacrificing their own joy. In reality, peace built on resentment isn't peace at all. It's a slow erosion of self. I realized that if I gave in here, I wouldn't just lose a wedding. I would lose my voice, my future, and maybe even my marriage before it began. The lesson was clear. Though painful boundaries don't set themselves. You can't expect others to stop taking unless you decide where the line stands. Saying no isn't cruelty, it's protection. I began to understand that resisting this co-bride fantasy wasn't just about keeping Clara from stealing my dress or my day. It was about rewriting the script of my life, one decision at a time. And I knew I couldn't face this alone. That's when I turned to the people who had always stood by me, Ethan, my grandmother, and the friends who refused to let me be erased. The night after discovering the co-bride emails, I sat at my grandmother Margaret's kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. Her apartment smelled of cinnamon and old books, a comfort I desperately needed. She listened without interruption as I poured out every detail: the dress, the Instagram post, the endless pressure. When I finally stopped, she leaned back with a weary sigh. "Your mother pulled the same trick on her own sister," she said quietly. The revelation stunned me. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was a family pattern passed down like unwanted inheritance, repeating itself across generations. Grandma shuffled to her cedar chest and pulled out a folder of documents. Inside were papers that named me co-owner of her house, executor of her estate. "I've been preparing for this day," she said, her eyes sharp with clarity. "I wanted to make sure they couldn't take everything from you." Her gesture wasn't just about money, it was a shield. It reminded me that I wasn't powerless, that there were people rooting for me. Sometimes in the middle of chaos, all you need is one person who says, "I believe you, and I'll stand with you." Ethan, my fiancé, was another anchor. He sat beside me that evening, tapping numbers into his laptop, showing me we could afford the wedding without parental funding. "It won't be easy," he admitted, "but we can make it work. We don't need their money if it comes with chains." His words were both terrifying and freeing. Financial independence meant sacrifice, but it also meant control. And this is something many couples face when parents use money to buy influence. Walking away from that support feels like loss, but in truth, it can be the first step toward freedom. My best friend Naomi, my maid of honor, arrived the next day, armed with a notebook and fierce determination. We're documenting everything she declared, sketching a timeline of every boundary violation. Emails, messages, screenshots. We'll build a record so no one can twist the story. She reminded me that boundaries aren't just about saying no, they're also about accountability. Without proof, people can rewrite history, but evidence makes the truth undeniable. Her meticulous notes became both a shield and a sword, giving me the confidence to hold my ground when doubt tried to creep in. And then came Marcus, Ethan's old roommate, now an IT security consultant. He spent hours resetting passwords, adding two-factor authentication, and locking down every vendor account. "Your family won't be hijacking this wedding anymore," he said with a grin. Watching each safeguard click into place felt like reclaiming stolen territory. Piece by piece, ally by ally, I was building an army not of anger, but of support. And deep down, I knew this battle wasn't over yet. Because if my parents and Clara had pushed this far already, they wouldn't stop quietly. The real war would come on the wedding day itself. The morning of the wedding, I arrived at the venue early veil, carefully packed, and dress hanging in a protective bag. My heart raced as I spotted my parents in the lobby, their voices raised at the coordinator. Clara stood behind them in a gown alarmingly similar to mine, her eyes scanning the room as though she were rehearsing her entrance. We had an understanding about a sister ceremony my mother insisted waving her hands dramatically. The coordinator looked confused, flipping through the contract. That's when I stepped forward steady for the first time in weeks. There is no sister ceremony. Security 3 of Ethan's college friends in suits moved into position near the doors, calm but firm. When my father tried to push for changes, the coordinator shook her head. Only the bride and groom can authorize adjustments. The clarity of those words felt like oxygen in my lungs. For too long, my life had been dictated by family demands and subtle guilt. But on this day, the lines were visible. This was my moment, and the boundaries I had fought so hard to build were finally being enforced. It was proof that preparation matters more than hope. Of course, Clara tried one last stunt. Just before the reception, I spotted her sneaking toward the DJ booth, clutching a handwritten note for a special sister toast. My best man intercepted her with a polite but unyielding smile. "The bride's playlist is set," he said firmly, guiding her back to the table. Watching that unfold, I felt a rush of relief. It wasn't just about stopping Clara. It was about knowing I wasn't alone anymore. When you set boundaries, allies naturally gather to help hold the line. It's something many of us forget. Asking for help is a kind of strength. Later, my parents cornered me in a side room, accusing me of humiliating them in front of friends and relatives. My mother's tears fell with practiced precision, my father's voice heavy with anger. "You'll regret this," he warned. But for the first time, I didn't flinch. I looked at them, really looked, and realized how much of their power came from my fear. "Thank you," I said softly, "for showing me exactly who you are." In that moment, I understood a truth that applies far beyond weddings. Clarity about others often comes painfully, but it frees you to decide who you'll be. When I finally stepped onto the dance floor, surrounded by laughter music and the warm glow of chandeliers, I felt lighter than I had in years. Ethan's hand slipped into mine, anchoring me in joy rather than fear. The lesson was clear. A wedding is not just about vows to another person. It can also be a vow to yourself, a promise to stop surrendering pieces of who you are. Still, as the night unfolded, one question lingered in my mind. What would life look like once the music faded? The guests left, and the battle was truly behind us. 6 months after the wedding, life felt entirely different. Ethan and I had moved to a quiet town in Vermont, far from the chaos of family demands. Mornings were slow and peaceful, with coffee by the window, instead of arguments in my parents' kitchen. For the first time, I could breathe without waiting for the next crisis. The space between us and them wasn't just miles, it was oxygen. Distance gave me clarity, showing me how much energy I had wasted trying to earn approval that would never come. Sometimes freedom is as simple as reclaiming your own silence. My grandmother Margaret became a regular visitor, settling into a retirement community just 10 minutes away. Her presence was a reminder that family could mean support instead of sabotage. She often told me patterns are broken by the brave, and I realized that courage doesn't always roar. It sometimes whispers in the quiet decisions we make each day. By choosing distance, by choosing boundaries, I wasn't losing family. I was creating space to redefine what family truly meant, people who show up with love, respect, and no strings attached. That redefinition changed everything about how I lived. Looking back, I saw the lessons more clearly. Part of me had always believed peace came from surrender, letting Clara borrow, letting my parents decide, letting the spotlight shift away. But peace built on silence isn't real. It erodes you slowly until you barely recognize yourself. My wedding taught me that boundaries are not selfish, they are sacred. They protect joy, relationships, and futures. I know many watching this have felt the same tug of war in their own families, whether over weddings, careers, or simply daily choices. You are not alone if you've ever whispered enough. The truth is, clarity comes when you stop asking, "What will they think?" and start asking, "What do I need?" For me, that meant standing firm against a co-bride fantasy, reclaiming my voice, and building a new life where respect was the foundation. For you, it might mean setting limits with relatives, redefining traditions, or daring to choose differently than expected. Boundaries don't erase love, they make real love possible. And that's a lesson worth sharing, because every story like mine is a reminder that we are allowed to write our own endings. So if this story resonated with you, if you've ever faced the struggle of choosing yourself against pressure, I'd love to hear it. Share your experience in the comments below. Your voice might inspire someone else to be brave. And if you believe more people need stories like this, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. This community is built on real conversations, and your presence matters. Together, we can remind the world that peace isn't given, it's created. And it starts with you saying, "This is my life, and I choose joy."